Pressed on what to do about climate change, Deputy Interior Secretary nominee David Bernhardt informed Congress this week that he was not going to sacrifice jobs for this. His testimony reflects President Trump's stated priorities, but it misunderstands basic economics. It is the failure to act that will wreck the economy. Climate change is an increasingly serious economic matter to be confronted and solved. International leaders understand the global risks. That's why United States President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May, who have an informal pact of silence on the subject, are facing increasing diplomatic pressure. Chinese President Xi Jinping has reached an agreement with 30 nations to support free trade and the Paris Climate Agreement. President Xi also met with California Governor Jerry Brown to further discuss clean energy opportunities, and China continues to transition from coal to green energy. India wants to be an iconic climate leader too, and its citizens now rank among the leaders of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And French President Emmanuel Macron is openly defying the White House. His widely circulated video invited American scientists to immigrate to Paris. In the United States, Washington Governor Jay Inslee and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are discussing the economic benefits of climate change cooperation. Two Republican governors of Massachusetts and Vermont and a Democratic governor in Virginia are all adopting new policies to support the Paris Accord and otherwise address climate change. In sum, many leaders are simply ignoring Donald Trump. Meanwhile, climate activists are finding creative new ways to directly pressure both the Trump administration and politicians elsewhere, albeit with mixed results. Tens of thousands of public comments appeared on proposed efforts to repeal EPA's environmental rules. Environmental advocates are pursuing new litigation and rulemaking strategies related to the Clean Power Plan, the EPA methane rules, and other matters. Government officials in Switzerland rejected a citizen's complaint, but the case could be headed to the European Court of Human Rights. And 3 climate change activists glued themselves to a car and blocked an entrance to Heathrow Airport. Perhaps the convicted protesters will be forgiven their sins because the faith-based movement to address climate change is growing. Pope Francis is concerned, and Vatican bishops expressed hope that he can change President Trump's mind. PBS News reports that the growing number of climate conservatives, sometimes called the eco-righteous, includes 10,000 people in the Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, as well as former cabinet secretaries George Shultz and James Baker, Republican megadonor Andy Sabin, and the Noah's Ark Caucus, led by Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo. This week, Mr. Curbelo joined 2 Republican members of the Climate Solutions Caucus, Florida Congressman Brian Mast and New York Congresswoman Elise Stepanik, and they sponsored a House resolution encouraging American innovation to improve environmental stewardship. The creeping crisis of climate change requires action, not just words and resolutions. Political leadership is needed to reorient the climate debate and to shape our policies. Most significantly, political leadership will help the scientists overcome the misinformation campaigns using straw man arguments, but eventually solutions require the implementation of expensive infrastructure measures and thinking on a planetary scale. Climate change happens slowly, but those solutions are needed soon because climate change is steadily creating abundant environmental change. Ecosystems feel the changes. Joshua trees in the Mojave Desert are dying out because the shallow root system of the saplings are vulnerable to hotter and drier weather. An entire lake in Guatemala has disappeared. Forests are shifting to the northwest. North American birds, including 9 songbird species, have breeding patterns that cannot keep pace with the shifting spring blooms. Even Antarctica is changing. Miles of ice are collapsing into the seas, and the continent is turning green. Its penguins face the threat of extinction due to ecosystem changes and rising sea surface temperatures. Humans are affected too, with health impacts on residents of low-lying island nations. Allergy seasons are getting worse, and the global agricultural economy is truly feeling the heat. Models and statistical evidence show a decline of wheat and barley crop yields, corn, rice, and soybeans too. Farmers are adjusting their crops. Champagne makers have developed new practices, and melting permafrost leaked into the Svalbard frozen seed bank in Norway. And fishermen should worry about the disappearance of cod and haddock from the Gulf of Maine. The insurance industry sees the rough waters ahead. Insurers are preparing for more storms, a doubled rate of coastal flooding, and higher premiums. The future of Florida, coastal Virginia, and many other low-lying, flood-prone places is at stake. And of course, the poorest communities and nations least capable of adapting and retreating will suffer the most. Rather than denying these many problems or cutting scientific research, society needs to invest even more to understand and combat the uncertainties. Dams and reservoirs affect the carbon cycle. Improved climate models can better predict storms and droughts, and Michigan State University scientists are very concerned about an American water crisis created by declining infrastructure and unpredictable hydrologic cycles. And some species of coral might be able to withstand the changing climate, but the Great Barrier Reef remains at risk. With greater knowledge and commitment, humanity can act and adapt. But the solutions won't be easy. Californians worry about higher gas prices. Australians, for whom the climate extremes could become particularly acute, must abandon the Carmichael coal mine. For some businesses, denial is the response. Exxon and Chevron keep resisting activist shareholder initiatives. Some companies are sending lobbyists to international climate change meetings to persuade diplomats not to regulate fossil fuels. No wonder that calls for divestment from pension funds and demands for climate-related financial disclosures by corporations are getting louder. The CEO of Royal Dutch Shell seems attuned to the risks ahead and calls for climate change policies and adherence to the Paris Agreement. Business leaders are realizing that investing in the earth yields a pretty good return. An editorial in the Financial Times even noted that macroeconomic policy needs to change because climate change triggers financial instability and rising market volatility. But unfortunately, with each passing month, atmospheric carbon, global temperatures, and sea levels rise too.